Hi, welcome back to Blue Mountain Bushcraft and Outdoors. Today we're going to be doing a Gauntlet review for a Fiddleback Forge Bushfinger. Stay tuned, it's a pretty nice knife. Fiddleback Forge is a true custom knife manufacturer. Most of their knives are 100% handmade from start to finish, but a handmade knife of that caliber comes at a very high price. This Bushfinger is part of their mid-tech line. The components are all made by machines, subbed out, and they're then assembled and hand-tuned by the folks at Fiddleback Forge. The mid-tech Bushfinger has an overall length of 8 3/4 inches. It's got a 4-inch blade, and it is made with premium 1/8 inch CPM S35 VN stainless steel. Steel is very well known for its extreme toughness, edge holding, and corrosion resistance. The handles are black canvas micarta, and the supplied sheath is leather and is made by JRE Custom Sheaths. Let's see what this custom Bushfinger can actually do in the field. Okay, so Fiddleback Forge doesn't put a really sharp 90-degree spine on these knives. And they do that because they say that that 90-degree spine actually induces some structural weaknesses and can be a cause of stress fractures. So, well, I've personally never seen that happen on an outside edge like this. I have talked to some machinists and people in the know, and they say, yeah, it is a possibility, though much less so on an outside corner than, say, an inside corner. Inside corners are much more susceptible to that. But it is sharp enough to get sparks a little bit. So I'll show you what the spine is capable of, and I'll show you a little trick that I discovered. Kind of weak. Out towards the tip it's a little better. Let's try this rod. Again, it's much better out here. Okay, so what are my impressions of the Fiddleback Forge Mid-Tech Bushfinger? I had to tell you, I really liked the knife. When I first pulled it out, I looked at it and I liked the blade profile itself, but I looked at that handle and I really thought it was going to be too thin for me. I usually like a little bit more meat in the handle. However, I didn't get any hand fatigue with this. With all the cutting I did with it, it stayed comfortable the whole time. The lack of a really sharp 90-degree spine I thought was going to be an issue for me. But as it turns out, it's not an issue at all, and I almost kind of prefer it. This has a really nice thin blade profile, a really delicate tip, so doing fine detail work with this is an absolute pleasure. It does really, really well at that. But when you're doing fine work and you're doing little push cuts and your thumb's up here on the spine, or you're working it up here, or you're push cutting like that on knives that have a really super sharp 90-degree spine, that can start to get to be an issue in your thumbs. But this really isn't. You've got that nice sharp surface up here for striking and a nice sharp surface here for striking. So, you know, your hand might be different, but for me, no hot spots there, and it does a phenomenal job at striking a ferro rod. The continuous curve to the edge is something I love, something that I've grown accustomed to in my Skookum bush tool. This has it, and you know, it does great. Stainless steel. I know a lot of people prefer high carbon steel. Okay, I understand that. You're not going to hit the back of the spine of this knife with a rock and get a spark. All right, you know that going in. So if you recall in the beginning of the video, I outlined that this wasn't just any stainless steel. It's not 440, 420 high carbon, anything like that. This is CPM S35VN, which is a crucible steel, which means it's tough as shit. If you can see the tip on that, it's really fine. You saw some of the batoning I did with it. Quite honestly, if this was my knife and I'm out in the field with it, I probably wouldn't have batoned a log that big with it. Because even with this being a super steel, you're still running the risk of breaking the tip, which I would not want to do on this knife. But that being said, I'm not out in the field with it, close to home, and I'm pounding on this to see what it'll take. And it took it like a champ. And I think it took it like a champ because of the quality of the steel. Now, Farrell Woodcraft was the person to have it before me. He ran this thing through a bunch of different tests, and he didn't sharpen it. And I haven't sharpened it. I've batoned with it, I've carved with it, I've made feather sticks with it, I've done food prep with it, all sorts of stuff. And I haven't touched the edge. I haven't even stropped it. If you can see that, it is a very fine saber grind. It's not a Scandi or anything like that. Let's see how this does on this piece of paper. It's just a piece of computer paper. Nothing crazy. The wind's not helping me, is it? There are, right in there, I can feel it. There's a couple little spots in here where it could benefit from a little touch-up. Right up towards the tip, there's a little bit of edge degradation. But for the most part, two guys beating the crap out of this knife and not doing anything to it, it's still got all sorts of functional sharpness. And you saw me slicing up that tomato. That was an extraordinarily ripe tomato. As a matter of fact, half of it was rotten, so I could only do part of it. And this edge had no problem cutting through that. So I am extremely impressed with the edge holding capabilities of this S35VN, as well as the toughness of the steel. Now, one last thing I want to touch on, or one of the last things I want to touch on, is the handle. The handle is canvas micarta. It is perfectly integrated into the tang of the knife. There's no sharp edges anywhere. Everything is nicely beveled. The edges are nice and rounded. And it really fills the hand nicely for such a thin profile. If you can see, it's also got these ridges. They call it 3D machining. But they're essentially ridges. They're not harsh ridges. They don't abrade the hand, but they give you a little bit of extra traction, along with the flare out here towards the end of the scales. That said, guys, this is not a stabbing knife. And if you need to stab something with it, make sure you put your thumb up here. And I'll show you why here in a second. I'll roll in a clip. I damn near took my pinky off. Fortunately, I was able to stop it before I cut myself, but it was close. Last thing I want to talk about is the sheath. The sheath is just your basic JRE Industries leather sheath. Nothing crazy, nothing special. It's well sized for the knife, and I like the styling of it. The ferro rod loop is a nice touch. It's just got the belt loop here, and it does have a place that you could put a dangler, although it doesn't have a dangler installed. This is not a wet formed sheath, all right? Decent enough sheath, but no retention. So this would be a good candidate for a custom sheath. If you wanted a good custom leather sheath, I highly recommend Wolf Customs. Justin Wolf does a bang up job. So final thoughts on the Bushfinger. Guys, I give it a big thumbs up. I like this knife. I like it more than I expected. It does everything from heavy duty work down to extremely fine tasks extraordinarily well. It holds an edge like nobody's business. And it's made out of premium steel that is extremely tough. So you get a lot of strength in a very thin package, which makes this a better cutter. So if you guys are in the market for a good high-end belt knife, I don't think you can go wrong with this. Guys, make sure you log on to www.thegauntlet.tv if you want to follow this knife through its travels in the Gauntlet. Make sure you check out the site. There's all sorts of other terrific reviews there, all sorts of different products. Stuff's getting added to that all the time. If you want to check us out over on Facebook, you can come over to my site, Blue Mountain Bushcraft and Outdoors. Send me a join request. We'll get you hooked up straight away. Guys, if you liked the video, make sure you hit like. Please share it with your friends. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Things have been really slow lately with the loss of my computer, but we're working on getting the production level up again. So, all right, guys, take care. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.